Welcome back to the Travel Coach Network podcast. It is I, Sahar Rose DeVore, the founder of the Travel Coach Network and the creator and instructor of the Travel Coach Certification Program. Today, I have a really special guest, one of our TCN members, Kristin Templin. She is an experienced travel writer, travel coach, and travel designer who has traveled through over 151 countries. And after experiencing substantial loss, corporate burnout, and needing a way to quote unquote save herself, she believed that travel changes you in ways that you would never expect and gives you an immense boost in confidence and self-awareness. And we're going to dive into all that. Kristin, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So before we dive into all of that, do you want to share, where did your love of travel stem from?
Honestly, I have no idea. I grew up in a very small town in northeastern Ohio where most people didn't even leave. Like most people didn't even go to Pennsylvania, and we lived 10 miles away from it. But for whatever reason, my family was a little bit different. My father loved to travel. Every chance he got, he was packing his bags and heading off. And I guess that was one of the things that kind of instilled the bug in me. When I was in high school, I went to Europe for the first time, absolutely fell in love with it. I realized that there was a different way of life that didn't include driving your car everywhere and going to work or going to school and then sitting at home all night. And I think that was the thing. It awoken my desire to actually be able to experience different ways of living. I studied abroad when I was in college multiple times. And then as soon as I graduated, I knew I didn't really want to spend long term in the US. So I got as many working holidays as I could before eventually finding a permanent job in New Zealand, lived there for a while, and then basically went rogue from there.
I love that you mentioned experiencing different ways of life or living, so different lifestyles, and that can be pretty attractive to people. What is it about seeing different ways of living, the way different cultures do things, and kind of immersing yourself in that? What do you think is so attractive to travelers?
Well, I think one aspect of it is traveling overall is very, very humbling. It makes you really take a step back. It makes you look at the way that you're living your life. It makes you see that perhaps there's better ways of doing things in different parts of the world. And when you experience how things are somewhere else, again, it just helps you take that inward look at yourself and the society that you're living in. And it helps you really decide and make a conscientious effort to make your life better. And I think that's one thing that will, well, sometimes I wonder, like, if I would have stayed in northeastern Ohio, if I would never have left, if I would have just, settled down there, who I would be as a person. And I think that's one of those things. If I wouldn't have experienced so many different cultures, I have no idea who I would be today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I can understand, and I relate to that as well. But with 151 countries under your belt so far, I know this is always a tough question, but do you have a favorite or two?
Oh, of course. Everybody always asks this and they always think it's tough, but it's for me, it's not. It's India and Mexico. I've spent 2 years living in India pre-COVID, spent a year in Mexico during COVID. In both of those countries, I mean, they're both huge countries and incredibly diverse countries. And I think that's one of the things that I love about them. You've got everything. You've got, beaches, you've got mountains, you've got historical sites, which I love, amazing food. I gained a lot of weight in India, and also incredibly friendly and welcoming people. And I learned a lot during those 3 years when I was in between those two countries. And yeah, they're definitely my favorites.
I love that. Yeah, they're incredible countries and very big, like you said. People don't really realize how large India and Mexico both are until you get there and try to travel around, especially India. Um, yeah, but like I said in the introduction, you say that travel changes you in ways that you would never expect and can give you an immense boost in confidence and self-awareness. Can you explain to our listeners, at least from your perspective, or give some examples of these?
Definitely. Like I'll use my own personal experience to give an example. Back in 2010, my dad died suddenly, and he was only 65, so that was already a bit of a shock. And the aftermath of that was basically the breakdown of my marriage. So I had been with my ex for 9 years, and everything felt like it was falling apart at the same time. I was living in New York when my dad died, but I got relocated to Hong Kong, where I spent 4 years working for a very large travel company. And it just felt like everything slipped away. And after 4 years, I was like a shell of a person. So I was going to work every day, was like kind of miserable. I was scared of my own shadow. Like I didn't know who I was at all anymore. And honestly, there were times when I was like, I'd be really happy if I didn't wake up tomorrow. And I was like, oh God, that's got to change. I've got to do something. And so within 24 hours, I quit my job and quit my marriage. And I, well, it took me a little bit longer to leave Hong Kong, but I started traveling and I spent a month in New Zealand initially, which, I had spent 3 years there previously. So I had a lot of friends and stuff. But I spent a month there just kind of licking my wounds and figuring out what I wanted my life to look like. But during that time, every single day, I made myself do something that scared me. And honestly, at that point, I was scared of everything. So it was like, I mean, it could be anything from like paragliding to like getting a bikini wax. It was just, I was not myself. I wasn't a person I was proud of. And by forcing myself out of my comfort zone, I started to develop, my own sense of self and my own self-confidence more. And so like that forcing myself to do something scary every day turned into, forcing myself to do something every week, every month, and so on as I gradually, got myself back. And during that period, I was in New Zealand for a month. I was in Australia, both of which are two countries you can do lots of scary things in. And then I was in Europe for a while. And then, by the time I kind of picked up the pieces of myself, it was about 6 months later. Then I started venturing into some more off the beaten track places around the world. And I never would have been able to do that if you would have said, 6 months earlier that I was going to be like backpacking through Uzbekistan or traveling through Ethiopia. And it really did save me. And I know a lot of people kind of think that may be a big statement, but it did. Yeah, I don't know if I would be here if I didn't make that change.
Yeah, I think
And
there's a lot of
if I
people
was
that
like the person I was.
yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there who can relate to that. I know I've always talked about how I always struggled with depression and really bad anxiety for the majority of my when I was younger. And then especially after graduating from university, I was at a place mentally where I just wasn't happy as well. I didn't know who I was, what kind of life I wanted. I had a lot of stresses and a lot of worries going on, plus the fact that I had anxiety that just compounded everything. And I've always said that I don't know who I would be if I never started traveling, and I don't know where I would be if I never started traveling. So even though, yeah, like it's a hard statement to say, like travel can save your life, but in many ways it definitely can. What do you think when you were traveling, kept you going? What was that, or what was that feeling that made you go from now to next place to next place? Because you came from a place, a mindset, and a place in your life where that was all completely, no pun intended, foreign to you, and you were so fearful of so many different things. But what kept you going to the next country, to the next country, to the next adventure?
Um, I guess the biggest thing was I didn't really have any options. Like I was kind of half-heartedly applying for jobs in New York, like, oh, maybe I'll go back, blah, blah, blah. And I would like read these job listings and I was like, ugh. And I would still apply for them. I was like, maybe I'll get it. And then I would be so fearful because there are so many jobs that I was actually qualified for that I was like, oh God, what if I get it? Like I have to go to this place and this place and this place. I still want to go there. And then it was very strange, but I was sitting in the Copenhagen airport and I was feeling a little bit like down because, my ex was British. I always thought maybe one day we would live in Europe um, and then I was like, oh gosh, maybe I'm never going to be able to live in Europe again. Maybe I won't be able to live abroad. I'm just going to sit in America. And then I realized I was like, oh man, I can go to grad school. I can go to grad school in Europe. It's much cheaper. I've always wanted to get my master's degree. So I started looking at programs. I got accepted into one in the Czech Republic at Charles University. And then, that was in February of 2016, but school didn't start until September. So I was like, oh, might as well keep traveling. And I had set a goal to reach my 100th country, and then I reached that and I went way beyond that. But a lot of it was just like, well, it's cheaper to travel than it is to live in the US. So, and that's exactly what I did. And I guess that was the thing that kept me going, is just my yearning to see so much before I settle down again. And having the easy excuse that, oh, I can't get a job now.
Yeah,
I've
definitely.
got school starting.
Well, I think I'm a huge believer that everything happens for the right reason. Everything happens when it's meant to happen. Even if you don't have clarity on that right now or tomorrow or next month, it will come to you down the road. And it sounds like from what I hear from you is you've gained some clarity over time and really sculpted a life that, brings the best out of you. We met obviously because you joined the travel coach certification program in the Travel Coach Network. What made you become interested in becoming a travel coach?
Honestly, as strange as it sounds, one of the biggest parts of it was for many years, I wanted to be a virtual assistant. Because it's a job that you can be mobile with. It's a job you can constantly upskill yourself with. And it sounded kind of perfect. And, I had a lot of experience in sales and marketing. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I could, be a virtual assistant. And so I started doing that, and I was doing discovery calls with a lot of female clients, and they were all women in their 40s, their 50s, most of them professionals. And almost every single one of them actually honed in on my travel experience. And they'd be like, oh my God, I would love to do that. It's like, well, why don't you? And they're like, oh, well, I'm scared. Like I don't know how, I don't even know where to start, and so on. And so I think about these women, and so many of them feel kind of lost because I know they're empty nesters, or they were married for a long time, now they're divorced. And I know that travel can change them. They just need to get the courage to do it. And I think that was the thing that really set the wheels churning, because I'm in the process of building up my own VA business, and I was doing a lot of freelance writing, and then there was just this thing in the back of my mind all the time. And so this year I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go. I'm going to try and see what happens. My travel coach business is still a work in progress, because I still have my full-time job and then my freelance job. So it's something I'm trying to build on.
Yeah, that's I hear that often where people are inspired by working with people in a different way already, like whether they're a different type of coach or they are work as a consultant in business or whatever it might be, but it's this theme of travel that they obviously are passionate about, but they didn't realize that people were interested in or questioning, how'd you do it? Or, I wish I could do that one day, or I'm a mom and now I have kids, or I work for, a company, or I am an entrepreneur. How can I still have that lifestyle? I always find it funny that travels, I always say, it's something that we all desire in our life to some degree. Not everyone's going to be backpackers like you and I and hop around to over 100 something countries, but whether it's simply incorporating it more into your lifestyle as a vacation, incorporating it into your remote work and being able to, sculpt your lifestyle that way and be more nomadic, whatever it might be, is having trips to, build your relationship with your children or your partner. Travel is this common theme that we all seek to some degree. And so it's always interesting from my perspective, hearing from all of you in the Travel Coach Network, what inspired you guys to become travel coaches, and who is it that you really ideally want to help? Because that varies per travel coach, everyone is so different. But when it comes to, I was reading, or I know that you talk a lot about extreme travel as well. Can you tell our audience what that is? What do you mean by that?
It's okay, it's not a term that I love. It's just the only term that I know. And extreme travel is basically like going really far off the beaten track. So it's going to places like Afghanistan, to Iraq, to West Africa. It's the really, really hard travel to places that people don't think of going to. Most of it is because of geopolitical instability. Some of it's just because of propaganda. But yeah, it's those places that people don't even think you could travel to.
And what do you think is the benefit of people traveling to those places? Why would you recommend that they go?
If they're a seasoned traveler, I wouldn't say somebody who's, maybe been to Italy once, go and hop on a plane to Afghanistan. But I think if it's somebody who has already traveled quite substantially, going to some of these extreme places, it really opens your eyes to, how life is really like there. Like I went to Iran back in 2015, and as an American, you have to be as part of a guided tour. And obviously Iran has a horrible reputation. But my tour guide was a woman my age, and we sat in one of these most beautiful mosques and talked about guys. And she was talking about her ex-boyfriend not being passionate enough and so on. And it really does change the way you look at a country. And Afghanistan's a really, really good example because everybody sees Afghanistan as being this war-torn, unsafe place. And in some ways that's true. But at the same time, Afghanistan was also a place where multiple cultures mixed. It's one of the most diverse countries in the world. It's had an undeniably important role in history. And the people are amazing. The people are so incredibly kind. And yeah, so now I have a very, very nuanced look at some of these places. And yeah, you end up seeing a country in a completely different way than the media has ever showed you, for instance.
Yeah, I love that. I always say that if we all traveled more, the world would be a better and kinder place, because
Oh, definitely.
being able to go into other people's place where they call home, or being in someone else's comfort zone and out of your comfort zone, really forces you almost to put your trust into others, to open your mind, to have these experiences that you have one perspective in your mind, but yet when you're in these environments and you're talking to people, and it can be as simple as a conversation, can really transform who you are, your perspective on things. And I feel like travel is such a powerful tool for that, where it really exposes us to different people and stories and cultures, and really can shape us into the best person and that we can be, right, with compassion and empathy and acceptance, and also, like you said before, self-confidence and self-reflection, all of that stuff. But Kristin, as we wrap it up here, is there anything you want to share with our audience we haven't talked about yet today, or what you've been up to, or where are you heading to next? I know you're in Brazil right now.
Not that I know of. Like right now I'm just traveling around South America because it's warm here. I came here because I was going to Venezuela. I was able to get a visa, which is possible for Americans, I promise everybody, and Venezuela is relatively safe. So I got the visa. I flew from Portugal, where I was, to Venezuela, and I was like, well, I'm here. I might as well just, stay in South America while it's summer here. So yeah, just kind of toddling around South America right now. Eventually heading back to Europe and Africa during the spring and then summer months. But no, I have a goal to try and get to country number 160 this year, which may or may not happen. I hope it does.
I believe you can do it.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't happen this year, I know it's going to happen soon. You know, you're not too far away there. But and also, I always love to ask, is there something, a fun fact about yourself that you could share with our audience that doesn't have to be travel or business related?
Well, I've got, I guess, two fun facts. The first one is I'm vegetarian and have been for 25 years. So I've traveled through some very, very meat heavy countries,
Sure.
which yeah. So people always ask about how difficult it is to travel as a vegetarian. And I am also 6 foot tall.
Oh,
So yeah, so the joy of like squishing a 6 foot tall body into a teeny tiny airplane seat, I know incredibly too well.
yep. And into bus seats and train seats on long hauls. I've learned to contort myself in various ways to be able to get some sleep. So I know what it feels like. Um, and where can our audience follow you, follow your journey, learn more about what you're up to, connect with you?
The best way to do it is either via my blog, which is notripophobia.com, or you can just follow me on Facebook. I just use my personal page to post lots of photos, but it's mostly all travel related. So feel free to follow me there.
I love that. And again, your blog in your website is such a clever name, Tripophobia. And when I came across that, I was like, that is very clever. So I love that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Kristin, thank you so much for joining us today. We love having you in the Travel Coach Network, and we loved having you on our podcast today. And we wish you happy and healthy travels wherever you go. And for everyone, be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Travel Coach Network. Learn more about us at thetravelcoachnetwork.com. Come give us a hello. We look forward to having you in our Facebook TCN community and hopefully having you as a guest on our podcast. You can find out more about joining our free Facebook group in our show notes, as well as you'll find all of Kristin's links that she mentioned in there too. You'll find a free beginner's guide to travel coaching in the show notes. And if you know anyone who may be interested in travel coaching, please be sure to send them our way. And until next time, my fellow wanderers, bye for now.